dust into the wooden bones of the market town. Horses neighed, cattle bawled, and men barked over prices with whiskey breath and worn boots. The last livestock auction of autumn was winding down, but a crowd still lingered near a corral gate. A bay mare stood trembling, ribs sharp under her hide, flanks striped with dried blood. Silas Carrion adjusted his hat against the glare. 35, a man shaped by land and silence, he rarely came to town except for supplies or horses. He had spotted the mare earlier that morning, and now, as the bidding thinned, his boot heels thudded against the packed clay. He approached the gate, but that was when he noticed her. A girl no more than 19 stood behind the corral, hair matted to her face, dress torn at the hem. Her bare feet were choked with dust. She did not speak or cry. Her eyes wandered, unfocused, as if following something no one else could see. Beside her stood a man with a bottle in one hand and a rope in the other, the rope tied not to an animal, but to her wrist. "Got a dumb one here," the drunk hollered. "Came out of my first wife, I think. She don't talk, don't hear neither. But she cleans, cooks, don't sass. Cheap," quote. A few men chuckled darkly. One spat on the ground. Silas turned away. He had come for a horse, not this, but then he felt it. Not a voice, not a cry, just a glance. The girl was watching him. No desperation in her face, no pleading in her body. Just a look, clear and fixed on his face. And in that look was something he had not seen in a long time. Understanding, or maybe a mirror of his own loneliness. The drunk stumbled closer. "You got coin. Want the horse? She comes with it. I ain't dragging her back. Not worth the dust on her toes." Silas hesitated. The mare pawed at the ground, blowing froth through her nostrils. The girl's gaze did not move. Finally, Silas looked the man in the eye. "I'll take both." Laughter broke out. "You buying livestock or starting a harem, Silas?" someone jeered. But Silas did not answer. He counted coins into the drunk's hand. Enough for a horse, not enough for a soul. The man yanked the rope toward him, but the girl flinched, stepping behind Silas instinctively. "She yours now." The drunk slurred. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Ain't worth feeding. Silas untied the rope, tossed it back, and led the mare out of the pen. The girl followed with soft, deliberate steps, holding only a thin shawl around her shoulders. When they reached his wagon, she stopped, waiting, silent. He opened the back and motioned for her to climb in. She folded herself into a corner, like someone used to being invisible. As he climbed to the driver's bench, he felt the faintest tug on his coat. Her fingers, small and calloused, had brushed his sleeve once. She didn't look at him now, her gaze fixed on the distant hills. But in that single touch, he felt it. She had chosen, in that moment, to trust him. The wagon creaked forward, wheels crunching over the hardpan road out of town. Behind him, the girl sat curled beneath a blanket, face turned to the wind. She never looked back. Neither did he. Silas's ranch wasn't much, just a main house with a slanted roof, a few outbuildings, and a long stretch of prairie where cattle grazed. Quiet, clean, enough for a man like him. He helped the girl down from the wagon. She stepped lightly to the ground, eyes sweeping over the land, not frightened, just watchful. Inside the kitchen, Silas stoked the fire and pointed to the kettle. She nodded and moved toward it, finding the tin cups and ladle like someone who'd always belonged near fire and hunger. Still, she hadn't made a sound. After supper, he handed her a piece of chalk and tapped the wooden doorframe beside the table. "Name," he said slowly. She looked at him, then crouched, and wrote a single word in soft, slanted letters. "Emmeline, Emmeline." Silas read. He repeated it once, then again, testing the sound. She gave no smile, only turned and walked toward the barn. The next morning, Silas found her in the stable, crouched beside the mare. The horse had barely eaten since the auction, its back legs swollen from old strain. Emmeline ran a damp cloth down its flank, whispering with her hands. Not words, not signs, just the careful rhythm of someone who listened with her palms and her breath. Silas watched, arms crossed. He had seen seasoned ranch hands kicked for less, but the mare stayed still, letting the girl wrap its leg with quiet patience. Maybe she couldn't hear, but she sure understood. Each night she wrote notes in chalk: bacon low, dog limping, wind smells like dust. They never spoke, but the silence no longer felt empty. Until the storm came. It started, like most Texas storms, slow and deceitful. A hot breeze rose at sundown. Silas noticed clouds brewing far off, but thought nothing of it. He was in the cattle shed when Emmeline appeared barefoot, hair wild, breath quick but soundless. She grabbed his sleeve and tugged hard. "What?" he asked. She pointed upward, her hands trembling, eyes wide with warning. A crack split the sky. A bolt of lightning struck the tree behind the shed. The blast shook the earth. Flames leapt as the tree collapsed in a shower of sparks. Silas stumbled back, stunned. How had she known? She had run to him before the thunder, before the air had changed. She had known. That night, after the fire was out, Silas sat across from her at the kitchen table. No chalk, no words. Just a man and a girl the world called deaf. And yet, somehow, she had heard. Since the storm, Silas began watching her differently. Not with suspicion, but with quiet curiosity. Emmeline never spoke, never signed, rarely wrote more than a word or two in chalk. Yet time after time, she seemed to know things before they happened. One morning, a led cow stood alone in the pasture, head low, refusing to eat. Silas thought it was nothing more than the cold. But Emmeline moved without hesitation. She laid straw in the birthing stall, drew fresh water, and stayed beside the animal, stroking its belly with steady hands. By nightfall, the cow was in labor. She had known. Silas didn't say a word, but that night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering who this girl really was. Days passed. Life on the ranch settled into rhythm. Emmeline boiled water, mended torn shirts, brushed the horses with careful patience. And always she listened, though not with her ears. Sometimes Silas caught her standing barefoot in the grass, eyes closed, palms open to the wind, as if the land itself whispered to her. The town noticed, too. It began with small whispers. At the blacksmith's, someone muttered, "She stares too long at the cattle, like she knows which one's going to die." At the general store, a woman pulled her child close as Emmeline passed, even though she carried nothing more than a basket of flour. Silas ignored it at first, but the unease grew. A ranch hand's goat birthed too early, and tongues wagged that Emmeline had touched it the day before. A boy fell sick with fever, and though Emmeline brewed herbs that helped him recover, his mother later whispered, how did she know what to give him without being told? Quote, "Fear fed on silence, and Emmeline's silence made her an easy target. 3 nights later they came. 8 townsfolk stood at the gate, boots grinding into the dirt, torches in hand though unlit. Their leader, old Mr. Withers, stepped forward, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. "We want her gone," he said flatly. "That girl hears things she ought not." Silas stood in the barn doorway, arms crossed, jaw hard. "She's mute," he replied. "That ain't the same as deaf." Withers shot back. "She sees storms before they break. She handles beasts that buck every man." "That ain't natural." A murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. Someone spat in the dust. Inside the cabin, Emmeline stood behind the curtain, watching. She had seen mobs before, faces twisted not by hate, but by fear pretending to be certainty. She moved to open the door, but Silas raised his hand, stopping her. He stepped forward, boots sinking into the thawing mud, and faced the crowd squarely. "She saved a child's life," he said, "or gave him the fever in the first place." A woman sneered. Silas's voice dropped low, steady. "I've lived 35 years, and I can count on one hand the people who ever truly heard me. Not my words, but my silences, my grief, she has." Without speaking a thing, the crowd stilled. "You want to call that a curse?" he went on. "Then you've forgotten what a blessing looks like." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Withers opened his mouth, but closed it again. One by one, they turned, boots heavy as they walked back toward town. The torches never lit. That night, the ranch was quiet except for the wind. Silas sat at the kitchen table, staring into the fire. Emmeline poured warm cider into 2 tin cups, set one before him, then sat across from him. She did not write or sign. Instead, after a long moment, she reached out and rested her hand on his. It was not thanks, it was recognition. The silence in that cabin no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like a bond being sealed, steady and unspoken, between 2 souls who had learned to hear each other in ways the rest of the world never would. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. Winter crept hard across the plains. Snow gathered against the fences, and the wind howled like wolves hunting in the dark. Silas worked the ranch slower now, his shoulders stiff from years of riding and labor, but he was not alone anymore. Emmeline walked beside him, quiet as always, but steady. She learned quickly. He taught her to ride, her small hands gripping the saddle horn, her balance guided by trust more than skill. She taught him signs, simple movements with her fingers that gave shape to words they had never shared aloud. Water, fire, thank you. Soon he found himself fumbling less, smiling more when she touched his hands to correct him. Nights were softer than before. They sat by the hearth, her needle stitching scraps into a cloak, his voice low as he played an old harmonica tune. She never said if she could hear it. She simply closed her eyes and swayed, as if the sound reached her in some other way. But the town had not forgotten. They still spoke her name in half-whispers at the well, still eyed her warily at church. Yet something was changing. When Tom Weaver's shoulder tore and the doctor was gone, he came to Silas's ranch. Emmeline bound the wound with steady hands, and 2 days later Tom tipped his hat to her in town. The widow, who had not slept in weeks, sat with her one night, and by dawn the woman wept with relief, clutching Emmeline's hand. Slowly the fear began to break. Then came the Sunday morning that sealed it. A 7-year-old boy vanished during chores. One boot found near the tree line, nothing more. Panic tore through the town. Mothers cried, men shouted, dogs bayed uselessly. Silas reached for his coat, ready to join the search, but Emmeline stopped him. She knelt in the dirt, pressing her palms flat to the frozen ground, eyes closed. She rose, walked a few steps, then knelt again, tracing marks no one else could see, a bent twig, a shifted pebble, a faint trail pressed by small feet. The townsfolk stared as she moved, silent, steady, pointing west. They followed her, Silas first, then Tom, then more. Through thickets, up ridges, down a dry creek bed, until, in a cedar clearing, they found him. The boy lay curled beneath a tree, ankle swollen, face streaked with dirt and tears. Alive. His mother ran to him, sobbing. Emmeline only knelt, brushing the boy's hair from his face. Relief softened her features, not pride, not triumph. When they carried the boy home, no one called her cursed anymore. They called her what she truly was, the girl who listened with her heart. Years slipped by. The ranch weathered storms and drought, but it also grew gentler. Children came often, learning from Emmeline how to listen to the wind, to animals, to silence. She never lectured. She showed them with her hands, her patience, her rare smile that felt like sunrise when it came. Silas built a bench beneath the cottonwood tree. That's where they sat most evenings, shoulder to shoulder, watching the sun sink into the wide horizon. He would pour tea, she would take his hand, and in the hush between them, they both felt full. One twilight, after years together, Emmeline turned to him. She had learned a few words, rough but careful. Her lips shaped them slowly. I do not need sound, she whispered. Only you. Silas blinked hard, his throat tight. I hear you, he said. Always have the wind carried their silence like a hymn across the prairie. From that day forward, no one questioned her again. When children asked about the quiet woman